The tray hit the concrete floor with a sound like a gunshot in a cathedral. Brown liquid sprayed across gray stone. Cheap stew splattered in an arc that seemed to freeze in the air for just a moment before gravity claimed it. The mess hall, a cavernous space that could hold 200 men, went silent. Not the quiet of meditation, but the sharp, breathless silence of witnesses to violence. She landed on one knee. The impact should have been graceless, jarring, the kind of fall that leaves a person stunned and scrambling. But there was something wrong with the physics of it, something that made the handful of men who were paying attention sit up straighter in their seats. Her body absorbed the momentum with an economy that seemed almost mechanical. Weight distributed perfectly, balance maintained, like a machine designed to fall without breaking. For 3 full seconds, there was only the low thrum of diesel generators outside the wire. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with that particular frequency that burrows into your skull after too many months in a forward operating base. Somewhere in the distance, a radio crackled with static, but inside the mess hall, nothing. Just 200 men holding their breath. The man who had pushed her stood over her now, Lieutenant Garrett Vance, 27 years old, 14 months out of the academy, 6 weeks in country. He was built like every recruiting poster ever printed. Broad shoulders, square jaw, the kind of symmetrical features that look good in dress blues at a change of command ceremony. His uniform was still stiff, the creases sharp enough to cut paper. His boots had that high polish that only comes when a man has nothing better to do with his time than maintain appearances. His chest was puffed out, his jaw set in a mask of theatrical indignation. This was a performance, and he knew it. Every man in the room was his audience. "This is the officer's table," he said. His voice was a baritone designed to carry, practiced in front of mirrors, refined through countless moments of asserting dominance over those he considered beneath him. He gestured with his thumb toward the long tables where enlisted personnel sat in tight rows, their trays balanced on their knees, their eyes now locked on the scene unfolding before them. "Your place is over there. Learn it." The woman on the floor did not look at him, did not look up at all. Her gaze was fixed on the spilled food, a meaningless splatter on gray concrete. Her hands, which had caught her fall, were open, relaxed. No tremor, no clenching of fists, no white knuckles gripping the edge of anger. She was a study in absolute stillness. Her fatigues were sterile. No rank insignia, no name tape, no unit patch. To Lieutenant Vance, to most of the room, she was a ghost. A contractor maybe, support staff. Someone who processed paperwork or managed supply chains. Someone who did not matter in the rigid hierarchy of a forward combat zone. Someone whose presence at the officer's table was an affront that needed correction. Her silence stretched. It became heavier than his shout had been. It drew attention more completely than his display of power. Men who had been focused on their food now watched. Men who had been talking in low voices now stopped. The weight of that silence pressed down on the room like a physical thing. Lieutenant Vance's face tightened. A small muscle jumped in his jaw. Her refusal to cower, to stammer an apology, to acknowledge his authority was not part of the script. This was supposed to be simple, a transaction. He asserts dominance. She submits. Order is restored. But she was not following the rules. She was a malfunction in the system. "Did you hear me?" he demanded. His voice rose half an octave. The confidence began to crack at the edges. From a table near the back wall, a man watched. His face was carved from granite, weathered by decades of sun and wind, and the particular kind of aging that comes from too many deployments to places where people try to kill you. Command Master Chief Hollis Rourke, 58 years old, 36 years in uniform, 3 wars, more combat actions than most men could count. He had gray eyes the color of a winter sea. Right now, those eyes were not on Lieutenant Vance. They were locked on the woman. He saw what the lieutenant did not. He saw the economy of her fall. The perfect distribution of weight, a movement designed to protect a weapon that was not there. Muscle memory from years of training. He saw the unnerving calm in her posture, the meditative stillness of a predator at rest. He had seen that stillness before, in other places, in other people. The kind of people who operated in the darkest corners of the world. The kind of people who solved problems that conventional forces could not touch. It was the rarest and most dangerous quality a warrior could possess. True calm under pressure. Not the false bravado of young men trying to prove themselves. Not the forced stoicism of soldiers following doctrine, but genuine, bone-deep tranquility in the face of chaos. Chief Rourke's hand, which had been lifting a cup of coffee to his lips, slowly lowered back to the table. A cold knot formed in his gut. A warning bell rang in the back of his mind, the kind of instinct that keeps a man alive through 3 decades of combat. He knew this was not an insult to a clerk. This was someone poking a sleeping dragon with a sharp stick. And he knew, with the absolute certainty of a man who had learned to trust his instincts over his eyes, that Lieutenant Garrett Vance was too arrogant and too blind to see the fire he was courting. The woman moved. Finally, it was not a scramble. It was not the panicked, clumsy movement of someone humiliated and desperate to escape. It was a flow, like water, like mercury. She rose to her feet in a single fluid motion. Her body unfolded with the precision of a complex machine, each muscle engaging in perfect sequence. No wasted energy, no unnecessary movement. She did not brush herself off, did not look at the stains on her pants, did not check herself for injury. She simply stood, and her eyes, a flat, unreadable gray, finally lifted to meet the lieutenant's. He was a foot taller than her, twice her width. It did not matter. The moment her eyes met his, the space between them seemed to warp. The perceived power dynamic inverted with a silent, violent snap. Something primal in Lieutenant Vance's brain screamed at him, a warning from a place his ego could not silence. An ancient part of his nervous system that had kept his ancestors alive on the African savanna by recognizing predators in the tall grass. He saw nothing in her eyes, no anger, no fear, no submission, no pleading. It was the look of a scientist studying an insect, the look of an engineer examining a broken machine. Pure, dispassionate analysis. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. In that time, she cataloged every detail, the slight tremor in his hand, the way his pupils dilated, a physiological response to a threat he was only just beginning to comprehend, the carotid artery pulsing in his thick neck, the uneven rhythm of his breathing. She calculated force requirements, angles of attack, 3 distinct ways she could end this confrontation before his next breath. The calculations were not a choice. They were an autonomic response, like breathing, like blinking. Then she broke eye contact, not away from him, past him, as if he were a piece of furniture, an obstacle to step around. She took 1 step, retrieved an unbroken bread roll from her fallen tray, and walked toward the exit. She did not hurry, did not look back. Her footsteps were silent on the concrete, a skill learned through years of moving through the world, unseen. The mess hall remained quiet. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Lieutenant Vance stood alone in the center of the room. His victory, which should have been complete in public, suddenly felt like a profound defeat. He had shouted and shoved and performed for his audience, and her silence had answered with more force than a physical blow. He let out a short, derisive laugh, a sound that was too loud and too brittle. "Guess she learned her lesson," he announced to the room. His voice had that forced quality of a man trying to convince himself of something. No one laughed with him. No one even looked at him. All eyes were on the door through which she had disappeared. The woman who had taken an insult without response. The woman who had looked at a lieutenant like he was an insect. The woman who had walked away without fear. Chief Rourke slowly picked up his coffee cup again. He took a long, slow sip. The liquid was lukewarm now, bitter. He had seen her file once, by accident. A routing error had put it on his desk for 30 seconds before a very nervous captain had arrived to retrieve it. Those 30 seconds had been enough. It was a file so heavily redacted it was mostly black ink. Entire paragraphs erased, dates removed, operational details scrubbed. But certain words had remained, certain phrases. Tier 1, Special Access Program, call sign Nemesis. A file that belonged to a ghost, a member of a unit that did not officially exist. A unit tasked with solving problems the rest of the special operations community could not touch. Lieutenant Garrett Vance had not just poked a dragon. He had tried to assert dominance over a force of nature. And Chief Rourke knew, with the certainty of a man who had survived decades of war by trusting his gut, that the universe would soon correct the lieutenant's error. The correction would not be gentle. It would not be kind. It would be absolute. He drained his coffee, set the cup down, and wondered how long it would take. The forward operating base was a scar of gravel and steel on an unforgiving landscape. It existed under a sun that baked the very air, turning it into a physical weight. By noon, the temperature reached 115 degrees. By 3 in the afternoon, it climbed to 120. The kind of heat that made thinking difficult, that made moving an act of willpower. The base was small, 200 personnel, a collection of prefabricated structures arranged in a rough rectangle. Concrete barriers formed outer walls, guard towers at each corner, razor wire strung between posts. In the center, the Tactical Operations Center, a low building with no windows and walls thick enough to stop small arms fire. Around it, barracks, a motor pool, a helicopter pad. The mess hall where Lieutenant Vance had just made the worst mistake of his life. This was a listening post, a place on the edge of the known world, staring into a new kind of darkness. The enemy here was not a simple insurgency, not men with AK-47s and improvised explosives, though those existed too. The real threat was something more insidious. A technocracy, phantoms who fought with algorithms and polymorphic signals as much as with bullets. They could cripple a command center with a line of code, turn a billion-dollar drone into a paperweight with a carefully crafted packet of data. This was why she was here. The woman Lieutenant Vance had shoved, the woman whose name most people on this base did not know. Kira Brandt, 28 years old, the operator. Not a soldier in the conventional sense, not someone who followed doctrine and filled out after-action reports. She was a weapons system, a unique fusion of human intellect and brutal training. Her presence on the FOB was a secret kept at the highest levels of command. She existed in the shadows of the base, a contractor with no official footprint, no paperwork, no email address in the directory. She was here to observe, to analyze, and if necessary, to act as a failsafe against a threat no one else understood. Her quietness was not a personality trait. It was a tactical imperative. In her world, noise was a waste of energy. Ego was a liability that got people killed. She had learned that lesson in the hardest way possible. Her father had been a legend in the old wars, Colonel Marcus Brandt, a pioneer of the same shadowy community she now inhabited. A man of immense skill and even greater discipline. He had been part of the first generation, the ones who had written the doctrine, who had figured out how to operate in the gray spaces between conventional warfare and intelligence operations, who had learned to move through the world like ghosts. He had taught her to shoot before she could properly read. 5 years old, a Ruger 10-22, standing on a wooden box at an outdoor range in North Carolina, his large hands guiding her small ones, teaching her breath control, teaching her to squeeze, not pull, teaching her that precision was more important than speed, that patience was the ultimate weapon. He taught her to read terrain like a map, to find cover where others saw only open ground, to identify choke points and kill zones with a glance. to move through forests and cities and deserts without leaving a trace, to find silence in the heart of a storm, to control her breathing until her heartbeat was a choice, not a reaction. He did not raise a daughter, he forged an instrument. Competence is the only currency that matters, he would tell her. His voice was a low rumble, gravel and honey. Rank, medals, reputation, they are ghosts, smoke. When the moment comes, all that is stripped away. You are left with what you can do, nothing more, nothing less. She had watched him live by that code. She had also watched him die by it. It was on a snow-swept ridgeline in a forgotten mountain range in eastern Afghanistan, December 2011. Kira was 15 years old. She was not there physically. She was thousands of miles away, sitting in a secure facility in Virginia, wearing headphones, listening to a comm feed. She was too young to be in that room, but her father had insisted. She needs to understand what this costs, he had told the commander. The mission had been compromised by a commander who valued his own gut feeling over the cold data his specialist provided. Colonel Marcus Brandt had argued for a different approach, a quieter, more patient plan, observation, intelligence gathering, then precision strikes. But he was overruled. The commander was a man much like Lieutenant Vance, a man with stars on his collar and confidence that exceeded his competence. He wanted a decisive, cinematic victory, something that would look good in a briefing, something that would advance his career. He got a massacre instead. 15-year-old Kira sat in that small room in Virginia, listening to the comm feed dissolve into static and screams. She heard the commander's panicked, useless orders, contradicting himself, changing plans mid-execution. She heard the disciplined final report from her father's team sergeant, calm, professional, reporting casualties, reporting position compromised, reporting no viable extract. And then she heard only the wind, the howl of a storm across a mountain ridge 8,000 miles away. Her father's last transmission was not words. It was just the sound of his breathing, slow, controlled, even in death maintaining discipline. That silence had burned away the last of her childhood. It had cauterized her soul. In that moment, sitting in a windowless room with headphones pressed against her ears, she made a vow. She would never be the one screaming into the static. She would be the one who could cut through it. She would become so competent that her presence alone would be the correction to the kind of arrogance that had killed her father. She was 18 when she entered the pipeline, the most demanding training program in the world. Basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. A place where women were not officially permitted in 2015. She did not ask for exceptions. She did not demand accommodation. She simply showed up. And when they tried to turn her away, she outperformed every standard, broke every record, met every challenge with such overwhelming ability that denying her became more difficult than accepting her. Her instructors were men carved from granite and fury, men who had spent their entire adult lives in special operations, men who believed, deep in their bones, that this was not a place for women. They did not know what to do with her. She did not complain, she did not quit, she did not falter. She simply did the work. Her face remained an unreadable mask, whether she was shivering in the freezing surf during Hell Week or assembling a rifle blindfolded in the armory. They tried to break her. They failed. They tried to understand her. They failed at that too. In the end, they could only do one thing: certify her. She became a ghost, a name on a list that was never seen, a file that existed only in the most secure databases. Her call sign was Nemesis, the problem solver, the final option. She hunted encrypted signals in the deep web, dismantled terror cells with nothing but whispers and leverage, walked unseen through the most dangerous places on Earth. Her successes were classified. Her failures did not exist. By the time she was 25, she had operated on 4 continents, had been in more firefights than most infantry platoons, had made decisions that had shaped the course of conflicts the public would never know about. This was the woman Lieutenant Garrett Vance had shoved in a mess hall. This was the stillness he had mistaken for weakness. He had no concept of the history, the training, the loss that was coiled behind those calm, gray eyes. He saw a small woman in his way. He did not see the pinnacle of a multi-generational effort to create the perfect human weapon. After leaving the mess hall, Kira found a quiet corner of the base, a space between two large shipping containers that smelled of rust and ozone. The metal walls radiated heat. The shadow was thin, offering little relief from the sun. She sat on a wooden pallet, ate the bread roll slowly, methodically, breaking it into small pieces, chewing thoroughly, hydrating with water from a canteen on her belt. She was not angry. Anger was a chemical reaction, a neurological distraction, a waste of glucose and oxygen that could be better used for problem solving. She felt a flicker of something else, a cold, professional pity. Lieutenant Garrett Vance was a flaw in the system, a bug in the code. He was a variable that increased risk without adding capability. And systems, she knew, had a way of purging their own flaws. Not immediately, not dramatically, but inevitably. Entropy always corrected imbalances. She finished the roll, wiped her hands on her pants, closed her eyes, slowed her breathing. Her heart rate dropped to a resting 50 beats per minute, a physiological state most people only achieved in deep sleep. She did not dwell on the insult, did not replay the scene in her mind, did not fantasize about revenge or vindication. She returned her mind to the problem she was here to solve. The enemy's signal. It was a ghost, a whisper on the electromagnetic spectrum that defied all conventional analysis. It appeared and disappeared without pattern. It used frequencies that should have been impossible. It carried data encrypted with algorithms that had not been cracked. For 6 months, intelligence agencies had been trying to track it, trying to decode it, trying to understand what it meant. She let her mind sink into the data, the patterns, the silent war being fought in the ether all around them. The mess hall, the lieutenant, the spilled stew. They were already gone, irrelevant data points. The signal was all that mattered. She sat in the narrow shadow between two containers, eyes closed, breathing slow, and waited for the universe to correct its own imbalances. She did not know it would happen in 3 hours, but she knew it would happen. It always did. The crisis came 3 hours later. It did not start with a boom. It did not start with gunfire or the shriek of incoming mortars. It started with a sound, a high-frequency tone that was felt more than heard, a piercing vibration in the bones of the skull, like a dental drill applied directly to the brainstem. It lasted for less than a second. Then silence, a new kind of silence, the silence of absence, the silence of systems dying. The generators sputtered, coughed, died. The constant thrum that had been the heartbeat of the base for months, that vibration you felt in your boots and in your chest, simply stopped. The lights went out, not flickering, not dimming, just instant darkness. The screens in the Tactical Operations Center went black. Every digital clock, every radio, every piece of networked equipment on the entire base went dead. It was a complete and total systems blackout, a digital decapitation. For a few seconds, the only sound was the wind, a hot desert wind that carried sand and the smell of diesel exhaust. For the first time in months, men could hear it, could hear the world beyond the wire without the interference of machinery. Then the shouting began. Panic was a contagion. It spread fast. In the Tactical Operations Center, Lieutenant Garrett Vance was at the center of the chaos. He had been overseeing the night watch, a position of minor responsibility that he treated with the gravity of a theater command. He sat in the commander's chair, felt the weight of authority, imagined himself as a wartime leader making crucial decisions. The blackout shattered that fantasy. "Get the backup generators online," he yelled. His voice was tight with a fear he tried to conceal with volume. The same technique he had used in the mess hall. Loud equals confident, loud equals in control. "They won't start, sir," a sergeant yelled back from the far corner of the room. His voice carried the edge of real fear. "The ignition systems are fried." "Switch to battery power." "Dead, sir. All of it. Something drained them instantly." Lieutenant Vance stared at the blank central screen where the drone feeds and satellite maps were supposed to be. It was a black mirror reflecting his own widening eyes. They were blind, deaf, alone, cut off from the world. His training had prepared him for ambushes, for improvised explosive devices, for firefights with small arms. It had not prepared him for this. This was something else. This was sorcery. "It's a massive EMP," he declared. He grabbed onto the first technical term he could remember from a PowerPoint presentation 6 months ago. Electromagnetic pulse. A weapon that could fry electronics. That made sense. That was something he could understand. Standard protocol, hardened defensive positions, all personnel to the perimeter. He was following doctrine, the doctrine he had memorized, the doctrine that had been written for conventional warfare against conventional enemies, the doctrine that was completely wrong for this situation. Chief Rourke had made his way to the TOC when the power died. He stood quietly in the corner now, watching. His face was impassive, but his mind was racing. He knew it was not an EMP. An EMP was a sledgehammer. Loud, brutish, indiscriminate. It destroyed everything in its radius, fried circuits, melted components. This was different. This was a scalpel. This was a targeted attack that did not just break the equipment, it had infected it, changed it, taking control of it. The lieutenant's orders were wrong, catastrophically wrong. Sending everyone to the perimeter was exactly what an enemy would want. It would consolidate the targets, leave the nerve center of the base undefended, create chaos and confusion while the real attack happened somewhere else. But Lieutenant Garrett Vance was the ranking officer present. His orders, however flawed, were the ones being followed. Men were scrambling in the sudden darkness, grabbing weapons, running to the walls. Their movements were clumsy with fear. The base's carefully constructed defenses were dissolving into disorganized panic. "I want a comms check every 5 minutes," Vance barked. "Runners between posts, now move." "Runners will be picked off by snipers, sir," Chief Rourke said. His voice was low, calm, a counterpoint to the lieutenant's frantic shouting. "And there's nothing to communicate. We're dark." The lieutenant whirled on him. His face was flushed. His eyes were wild. "I did not ask for your opinion, Chief. I am in command here." "Yes, sir," Chief Rourke said. His face remained impassive, but his eyes said something else. They said, "You are going to get us all killed." It was in that moment of peak chaos that she appeared. Kira Brandt stepped into the Tactical Operations Center from the outside darkness. The emergency lighting had not come on. The only illumination was from small chemical glow sticks that men were cracking open and throwing on the floor. Green light, sickly and weak. She moved through the panicked men like a stone moving through water, creating no ripples, making no sound. She carried a single piece of equipment, a ruggedized tablet, military grade, encased in a thick rubber housing. It was powered by a shielded, isolated battery of her own design. A battery that lived in a Faraday cage, protected from electromagnetic interference. The screen was glowing. Lines of cascading code scrolled past. Green text on black background, the language of machines. She did not look at Lieutenant Vance, did not look at anyone. She walked directly to the dead central command console, the heart of the base's network, the hub through which all data flowed. She knelt. Her movements were efficient, economical. With a small specialized tool, she pried open a maintenance panel. Inside was a nest of fiber optic cables, orange and blue and green, hundreds of them, a nervous system made of light. "What do you think you're doing?" Lieutenant Vance snapped. He strode toward her. His voice was regaining its command tone. Here was something he could control. A woman who had ignored his authority, who had made him look foolish. "I gave an order. All personnel to the perimeter." She ignored him. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, unplugging one specific cable from the main hub. Not randomly, with absolute certainty. She produced a small, custom-built interface from her pocket. It looked like nothing. A small black box with two ports. She connected it to the cable she had unplugged, then to her tablet. The screen of her device flickered. The code changed from green to amber. "That is classified equipment," the lieutenant bellowed. He was standing directly over her now. His shadow fell across her work. He reached down to grab her shoulder, to physically remove her from the equipment, to reassert his authority through force. Chief Rourke took 2 quick steps forward. His hands shot out, caught the lieutenant's wrist. "Sir," he said quietly. His voice was still calm, but it carried a weight that made Lieutenant Vance pause. "I would not do that." The lieutenant's hand hovered in the air, trembling slightly, half from anger, half from the sudden realization that the chief, a man who outweighed him by 30 pounds and had more combat experience than the lieutenant had years alive, was physically stopping him. Kira still had not acknowledged his presence. She was completely absorbed in the flow of data on her screen. Her eyes tracked the code. Her fingers tapped commands. She was fighting something invisible, something that was fighting back. "They're not outside," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through the noise of the room like a shard of ice. Everyone stopped. Every man in the Tactical Operations Center froze, even Lieutenant Vance. "The attack isn't coming from the perimeter," she continued. Her eyes remained fixed on the tablet. "It's coming from inside." She tapped a command into the screen. A schematic appeared, a blueprint of the base's own power and data network. A spider web of connections, power lines, data cables, routers and switches and servers. At the center of the web, a single point on the map was pulsing with red light, like a malignant heartbeat. They piggybacked a malicious handshake protocol onto the last supply drone's landing telemetry, she stated, not explaining, just reporting. Her voice had the clinical quality of a diagnostician reading test results. It wasn't an EMP, it was a logic bomb. It didn't destroy the system, it seized it. She looked up, not at Lieutenant Vance, at Chief Rourke. Her gray eyes found his in the dim green light. "They control our power grid, our automated defenses, our water purification. The generators aren't broken, they're locked out by their own control software." The implications sank into the room, a wave of cold dread, far worse than the fear of a simple physical assault. They were not just blind, they were hostages inside their own fortress. The enemy had turned their home into a cage. Lieutenant Vance stared at her. His mouth was slightly agape. His entire worldview, his understanding of warfare, his certainty about his own competence, was being dismantled in seconds by a quiet woman with a glowing tablet. That's not possible," he stammered. "The enemy's core signal is broadcasting from here," she said. She tapped the pulsing red dot on her map. "Maintenance Sector Gamma. It's a parasitic device, drawing power directly from the main conduit." She stood up. Her movement was fluid, devoid of any wasted energy. "They've established a new network topology. Our systems are now a subnode of their command architecture. They're using our own satellite uplink to route their global traffic." She paused. Let the full weight of the statement land. Let the men in the room understand what she was saying. "We are now a primary command and control hub for the entire enemy network." The room was utterly silent. The men looked from the operator to the lieutenant, and in that moment something fundamental shifted. The chain of commands shattered and reformed. Rank was a ghost. Authority was smoke. All that mattered was competence. and competence had a name. "Get me a direct line comms tech and two menu trust," she said to Chief Rourke. Her voice was not a request. It was a statement of operational necessity. A diagnosis followed by a prescription. The chief nodded once, sharply. "I have them." "What are you doing?" Lieutenant Vance demanded. His voice was thin, ready, the voice of a man who had lost control and knew it. "I am in command. I'm giving the orders." Kira finally turned her head and looked directly at him. The same flat, analytical gaze from the mess hall. The look that had made him feel like an insect under a microscope. "Your orders are tactically unsound," she said. The words were delivered with the clinical finality of a medical diagnosis. "Terminal, inoperable. You are treating a systemic infection with a tourniquet. You are exacerbating the crisis." She turned back to the chief. "We have a window of approximately 10 minutes before they consolidate their control and purge the system's core memory, including their own entry logs. After that, we will be permanently locked out and they will be invisible." She held up her tablet. The amber code was scrolling faster now. Fighting, adapting. "This device is running a counter-algorithm. It's preserving the integrity of the core memory. But the enemy AI is adapting. It's a fight for processing power. A fight I will lose in 9 minutes and 40 seconds. She started walking toward the door. The chief followed. So did two other men. Seasoned NCOs who understood, in their bones, that this woman knew what she was doing. That following her was the only rational choice. "The tech needs to patch me into the central server mainframe, port 7 Bravo, she said over her shoulder. "He'll know what that means. Your men will provide security. The device is in a shielded junction box. We have to remove it physically." Chief Rourke was already moving. He grabbed the arm of a young specialist, a kid named Miller, 22 years old, thin, nervous, but technically competent. "You heard her. Let's go." He pointed at two sergeants, hard men with scars and steady hands. "You two with me." They moved without hesitation, falling in behind Kira as if they had been training for this their entire lives. As if following a woman in unmarked fatigues through a blacked-out base was the most natural thing in the world. The institution, in a moment of crisis, had rerouted itself around incompetence, had found the signal in the noise. Lieutenant Garrett Vance was left standing in the middle of the room, utterly bypassed. He watched them leave. His face was a mixture of fury and humiliation. He was a commander with no one to command, an officer with no authority, a man whose illusions about himself had just been stripped away in front of 24 witnesses. Kira moved through the darkened corridors of the base with predatory grace. Her eyes had adjusted to the darkness. She navigated by memory and instinct. The two sergeants, both large, experienced men who had spent years in special operations, struggled to keep up with her silent, rapid pace. She did not slow for them, did not check to see if they were following. She knew they were, could hear their breathing, could hear the soft scuff of their boots on concrete. They reached Maintenance Sector Gamma, a maze of pipes and conduits deep in the bowels of the base. The air here was hot, thick. It smelled of charged ozone and heating metal, the kind of smell that precedes electrical fires. The walls were lined with exposed wiring, junction boxes, circuit breakers, the infrastructure that kept the base alive. "Here," she said. She stopped in front of a heavy steel panel. It was marked with high-voltage warnings, yellow and black chevrons, danger symbols, the kind of thing that made smart people keep their distance. Miller, the young comms tech, was breathing heavily. His face was pale in the glow of his headlamp. Sweat ran down his temples despite the air conditioning being dead. "Port 7 Bravo is behind that panel, ma'am," he stammered. "But it's a direct feed from the primary conduit. We touched the wrong thing and were vaporized." "I am aware," Kira said. Her voice was perfectly calm. She handed him a small, inert plastic card. It looked like a hotel key card, white, blank. "This is a frequency dampening key. When I tell you, insert it into the diagnostic slot. It will disrupt the enemy's control loop for exactly 3.5 seconds. That is your window to open the panel and connect my interface. Miller stared at the card, then at her. His hand was shaking. 3.5 seconds. Do not be early. Do not be late, she said. Your timing will determine the success of this operation. She turned to the two sergeants. Their faces were grim. Their rifles were raised, covering the corridor behind them. The device will have a localized defense system, most likely a high-energy microwave emitter. When the panel opens, it will activate. It will cook you from the inside out in seconds. Stay behind me. They took up positions, flanking the doorway. Their training overrode their instinct to question, to doubt, to second-guess. This woman spoke with absolute authority. She knew things they did not. They would follow her into fire because fire was preferable to incompetence. Kira knelt before the panel. Her tablet was connected to a coil of cable, an umbilical cord. She watched the cascading code. The amber had shifted to red in places. The enemy AI was aware of their presence. It was attempting to reroute power to this sector, to overload the circuits, to kill them before they could reach the device. On her screen, a timer counted down. 3 minutes. "Chief," she said. Her voice was now coming through his earpiece, the only comms channel she had been able to salvage, a narrow-band frequency that the enemy system had not yet locked down. "Status. We're in position outside," the chief's voice crackled back. Static underneath, the sound of a dying connection. "We have no idea what's waiting for us when the power comes back on." "It won't matter if we fail here," she replied. "1 minute," she announced. "Miller, prepare." The young tech positioned himself, the card in his hand, his other hand hovering over the diagnostic slot. A small rectangular opening in the panel, barely visible. His hand was shaking badly now. "Steady," she said. Her voice dropped, became a hypnotic, calming force. The kind of voice that could talk someone off a ledge, that could slow a racing heart. "Watch my hand. When it drops, you push." 30 seconds. The code on her screen was a frantic, chaotic waterfall of red. The enemy AI was fighting her, throwing up firewalls, attempting to rewrite the very firmware of her device. It was like wrestling with a digital god, an intelligence that existed in pure mathematics, that could think 1,000 times faster than a human brain. 10 seconds. She raised her hand, held it steady. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. She entered the same state she had been in between the shipping containers. The state of absolute calm. The state where time seemed to stretch. 5, 4, 3, 2. Her hand dropped. Miller shoved the card home. There was a loud click, metallic, final. And for a breathtaking moment, the oppressive hum of the parasitic network vanished. The background noise that had been vibrating through the walls, through the air, through their bones, simply ceased, like the world had taken a breath. The panel's electronic lock disengaged. Miller yanked the heavy door open. His movements were frantic now, desperate. Inside, nestled in a web of cables, was a device the size of a shoebox. It was made of a non-reflective black material, carbon composite, military grade, and it pulsed with a malevolent violet light. A light that seemed to come from deep inside the device, like a dying star. The light intensified. A low hum started, rapidly rising in pitch, from subsonic to audible to painful in less than a second. The microwave emitter. Kira moved before the sound could fully register in the sergeant's brains. She did not try to disable it, did not fumble with wires or look for a power switch. She plunged her hand directly into the tangled nest of cables. Her fingers moved by touch alone, by training, by a kind of knowledge that lived in muscle memory. She found a specific bundle, thicker than the others, shielded. She yanked. A shower of sparks erupted, white hot, burning her hand. The smell of scorched skin filled the small space. The violet light died. The rising hum cut out. Silence returned. Her bare hand had pulled the device's primary power feed. The thing that should have killed them was now inert, dead. A brick of expensive components and classified technology rendered harmless. Miller stared at her. His eyes were wide. There was no way she could have known which cable to pull by sight. The nest of wires was a chaotic tangle. 100 different cables. Any one of them could have been a trigger, could have detonated the device, could have killed them all. But she had reached in without hesitation and pulled the exact right one. "Connect me," she ordered. Her voice was tight with urgency now, the first hint of strain. Her hand was burned. The skin was red and blistering, but she did not look at it, did not acknowledge the pain. Miller fumbled with her interface cable. His fingers were clumsy, shaking. He plugged it into port 7 Bravo, a recessed socket deep inside the maintenance panel. The moment the connection was made, something changed. The lights all over the base flickered once. A brief strobe. Then the generators roared to life. That familiar thrum returned, power flowing through cables, life returning to dead systems. The screens in the Tactical Operations Center flashed on, but they did not display the familiar tactical maps, the satellite feeds, the drone cameras. Instead, they showed a single line of text on a black screen. Green letters, like an old computer terminal from the 80s. Nemesis protocol engaged. System purge initiated. In the maintenance corridor, Kira's fingers flew across her tablet. She was no longer just defending, she was hunting. The predator had become the aggressor. "The enemy AI is trapped," she announced. Her voice was cold as the grave. "I have it isolated in a virtual partition. It has lost control of the base network." She typed a final complex command string. Her burned hand left small smears of blood on the screen. She did not notice. "And I have its physical origin point." A map appeared on her screen, a satellite image of a nondescript building in a city thousands of miles away. Gray concrete, flat roof, no markings. It could have been a warehouse, could have been an office building, but it was pulsing with the same red light that had marked the device in Maintenance Sector Gamma. "I am transmitting the targeting data to the Global Strike Network," she said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, clinical, as if she were ordering supplies. "The asset is live." She paused. Her finger hovered over the final command. "Strike authorized. Time to impact 4 minutes." One of the sergeants let out a low whistle. He understood what had just happened. She had gone from total system failure to a retaliatory strike on the enemy's central command in under 10 minutes. It was not just a recovery, it was a counterattack of impossible speed and precision. It was the kind of operation that would be taught in war colleges for decades, if it were not so heavily classified that it would never see daylight. Suddenly, a new alert flashed on her screen. Red text, urgent. "Warning, biosignature detected, Sector Theta." "They had a team on the ground," she said. Her head snapped up. Her eyes locked with Chief Rourke's through the comms. "A recovery team for the device. The blackout was their cover." A burst of suppressed gunfire echoed from down the corridor. The distinct crack, crack, crack of short, controlled bursts. Professional, disciplined, not spray and pray, not panic fire. The sound of trained operators engaging targets. The chief's voice came over the comm, tight, urgent. "Contact. We have contact. Multiple hostiles. Sector Theta." Before the sergeants could react, before they could shift their weapons toward the sound, Kira was moving. "Miller, secure this position," she ordered. "No one touches this equipment." She unholstered a pistol from the small of her back, a weapon no one had known she was carrying, a compact Glock 19, black, utilitarian. She moved toward the sound of the fight. Her steps accelerated into a silent, fluid run. She was no longer an analyst, no longer a technician. She was an operator. And somewhere ahead, her people were in danger. She arrived at Sector Theta to find Chief Rourke and his two men pinned down behind a stack of metal crates, ammunition boxes, stacked 4 high, providing cover, but not much of it. Sparks flew as disciplined bursts of enemy fire chewed at their position. The rounds were making contact with precision, walking up the stack, probing for weak points. This was not suppressive fire. This was calculated, professional. The enemy was good. They moved with textbook coordination. 3 men, standard wedge formation, covering each other's advances down the corridor. Their weapons were suppressed. Their movements were fluid. They wore no uniforms, no insignia, just dark tactical gear, plate carriers, night vision goggles pushed up on their helmets. They did not need night vision now. The power was back. The emergency lights were on, dim red bulbs casting long shadows. Kira took in the entire scene in a fraction of a second. The kind of tactical assessment that most people could not make with minutes of study. 3 hostiles, standard wedge formation, advancing in bounds. 1 covers while 2 move, then roles switch. They were 40 feet from Chief Rourke's position. They would overrun it in less than 30 seconds. She did not join the Chief's position, did not run to cover and add her firearm to theirs. That was the instinct, the trained response, but it was wrong. Adding 1 more gun behind the same cover would not change the mathematics of the engagement. The enemy had momentum, had the initiative, had superior positioning. She needed to change the geometry. She climbed, using a series of pipes and conduits as handholds. Her movements were fast, precise, born from years of training in urban environments, climbing walls, scaling obstacles, moving through 3-dimensional space while most people only thought in 2 dimensions. She scaled the wall with the speed and silence of a spider. Her burned hand left small smears of blood on the metal pipes, but she did not slow. Pain was information, nothing more. In seconds, she was perched on a narrow beam 20 feet above the corridor floor, directly over the advancing enemy team. A maintenance catwalk, steel grating, barely 2 feet wide, the kind of place that maintenance workers use to access ceiling-mounted equipment, to change bulbs, to run cable. Not the kind of place you expected a threat to come from. The enemy team had no idea she was there. Their attention was focused forward, on the threat they could see, on Chief Rourke and his men, on the target they were moving to neutralize. They had made the classic mistake. They had forgotten to check their 6, had forgotten to look up. She waited. Let her breathing slow. Let her heart rate drop. Watched their movements, predicted their next steps. The point man moved past her position. Then the second man. She could see the tops of their heads, could count the rivets on their helmets, could see the slight cant in their weapons, the micro-adjustments they made as they advanced. The third man, the team leader, passed beneath her. She could tell he was the team leader by the way he moved, by the slight authority in his posture, by the way the other 2 deferred to his pace. She dropped, not directly down, at an angle, a controlled fall that put her on a trajectory to intercept. Her legs wrapped around his neck before he could register what was happening. A perfect triangle choke, her thighs locked, cutting off blood flow to his brain. He tried to grab her, tried to throw her off, but she was already moving, already in motion, already executing the next phase. Her pistol was up, sighted on the second man. He was turning. His brain was processing the fact that his team leader had just been taken down by something that came from above. His weapon was coming around, but he was moving through molasses, moving through time that had stretched and slowed. She fired 2 shots, a precise double tap to the center of his chest. The suppressor on her pistol made the shots sound like coughs. Quiet, almost polite. He crumpled without a sound. His plate carrier had caught the rounds, but the kinetic energy had stopped his heart, had knocked him unconscious, had taken him out of the fight. The point man whirled around, his rifle coming up. Fast, professional. He was good, better than the second man. His training was overriding his surprise. His muscle memory was taking over. But he was still moving through normal time, still operating at human speed. Kira was faster, still wrapped around the team leader's neck, still riding him down as he collapsed. She fired again. Another perfect shot. The point man's head snapped back. He dropped his rifle, fell backwards, hit the concrete floor with a sound like a side of beef hitting a butcher's block. The entire engagement had lasted less than 3 seconds. 3 hostiles down, 3 shots fired. The mathematics were clean, efficient, brutal. She unwrapped her legs and landed softly on the floor as the body of the team leader collapsed beneath her. He was unconscious now, brain starved of oxygen. She checked his pulse. Still alive. Good. Live prisoners were more valuable than dead enemies. They could be questioned, could provide intelligence. Chief Rourke and his men emerged from behind their cover. Their weapons were still raised, still ready, but they had not fired a single round. The fight had been over before they could re-engage. They stared at her, at the 3 bodies on the ground, at the woman who had just dropped from the ceiling like something out of a nightmare and ended a firefight in the time it took to blink. Kira walked over to the body of the team leader, knelt beside him. Her movements were methodical, professional. She went through his pockets, found a small data drive, encrypted, shielded, the kind of thing that held operational intelligence, mission parameters, targeting data. She pocketed it, stood up, looked at Chief Rourke. "Threat neutralized," she said. Her voice was perfectly even. No elevation in heart rate, no adrenaline shakes. The moment of brutal, beautiful violence was over. The analyst was back. She holstered her pistol, checked her tablet. The amber code had shifted to green. The counter algorithm had won. The enemy AI was contained. The base systems were secure. The strike package she had authorized was 3 minutes out. In 3 minutes, the building in that satellite image would cease to exist, would be reduced to rubble by a missile fired from a drone 30,000 feet up. The enemy's command node would be destroyed. Their network would collapse. "We need to secure these prisoners," she said, "and I need to debrief with command." The debriefing took place 2 hours later in the now fully functional Tactical Operations Center. The air conditioning was working again. The air was cool, almost cold after hours of desert heat. The screens were bright, displaying tactical maps and satellite feeds and drone footage. The mood was heavy, tense, the kind of tension that follows a crisis barely averted. The base commander had been flown in from regional headquarters, a full colonel, silver eagles on his collar. His name was Preston, 52 years old, career infantry officer. He had the weathered look of a man who had spent his entire adult life in uniform. He sat at the head of the conference table. His face was unreadable. With him was a man who needed no introduction, Admiral Garrison Webb, the overall commander for the entire theater of operations. A man whose authority was absolute, whose word was law across 3 countries and 2 million square miles of operational area. He was short, barely 5'7", bald, with eyes that seemed to see right through steel, through lies, through the carefully constructed facades that people built around themselves. He was 62 years old, had commanded carrier groups, had overseen operations in the Gulf War, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, had more stars on his shoulder than most men had years in service. Kira stood at one end of the table. Lieutenant Garrett Vance stood at the other. Chief Rourke stood against the wall, a silent observer, a witness. The 3 people who had been at the center of the crisis. The 3 people whose actions would determine what happened next. "Lieutenant," Admiral Webb began. His voice was quiet, soft even, but it carried immense power. The kind of power that did not need volume, did not need theatrics. "Give me your report." Lieutenant Vance cleared his throat. He had his confidence back. In his mind, he had already constructed a narrative where he was the hero, where his actions had saved the base, where the chaos had been managed by his steady leadership. He had spent 2 hours preparing this story, rehearsing it, convincing himself it was true. "Sir," he began, his voice rang with false modesty, the kind of humility that is really just pride wearing a mask. At 2200 hours, the base was struck by a coordinated attack. I immediately identified it as an advanced electronic warfare event and took command of the situation. He proceeded to spin a tale of decisive leadership. He claimed he had anticipated the enemy's strategy, that he had deployed personnel to key sectors to counter their infiltration, that he had maintained order and discipline in the face of unprecedented chaos. He painted Kira as a civilian contractor who had panicked initially, but then stumbled upon the enemy device by accident. "I directed her to interface with the system," he lied. His eyes were fixed on the Admiral, on the man whose approval he desperately wanted, whose respect he needed to validate his own self-image. "Using my tactical oversight, we were able to isolate the enemy signal and repel the attack." He even tried to take credit for the physical confrontation. "I personally coordinated the team that neutralized the hostile recovery squad," he finished. His chest was swelling now, his confidence growing with each lie, each fabrication. He had convinced himself. Now he just needed to convince them. The Admiral listened without expression. He did not nod, did not take notes, did not look at Lieutenant Vance. His gaze was on Kira, studying her, reading her. She stood perfectly still. Her face was blank. Her burned hand was bandaged now. White gauze wrapped around her palm and fingers. She showed no reaction to the lieutenant's words. No anger, no indignation, nothing. When the lieutenant was finished, a profound silence filled the room. Admiral Webb let it hang in the air for a long time. Let it grow heavy. Let it press down on everyone present. The silence was a weapon, more effective than any shout, any accusation. Then he turned his head slightly, just a few degrees. His eyes moved from the lieutenant to Kira. "Operator," he said. His voice was still soft, still quiet. "Your report." Kira did not offer a narrative, did not tell a story, did not try to counter the lieutenant's version of events with her own version. She simply placed her tablet on the table, tapped the screen once. The main display in the Tactical Operations Center came to life. It showed a complete timeline of the event. Not a story, not an interpretation, just data. Pure, unfiltered, irrefutable. It started with audio recordings, time-stamped, verified. The lieutenant's panicked, incorrect orders in the first moments of the attack. His voice tight with fear, contradicting himself, declaring it an EMP when it was not. Ownership everyone to the perimeter when that was tactically unsound. Chief Rorke's ignored warnings, his calm, professional voice trying to inject reason into chaos. Then Kira's own voice, quiet, clinical, identifying the real threat, providing accurate analysis. Next came system logs, raw data from the base network, timestamps and packet captures and protocol handshakes. The data proved her analysis of the logic bomb was correct, showed exactly how the enemy had seized control, showed that the lieutenant's EMP theory was not just wrong, but dangerously wrong, showed the countdown on her counter algorithm, the precise window she had to act. 9 minutes and 40 seconds, not an estimate, not a guess, exact. Then came video feed. It was from her own equipment, a micro camera she had activated, body cam footage. It showed from her perspective the entry into maintenance sector Gamma, showed Miller's shaking hands, showed the moment the panel opened, showed her burned hand pulling the cable, showed sparks in violet light, showed the device going dark. Then it showed the takedown of the 3-man enemy team. The footage was crystal clear, high definition. It showed her climbing the wall, showed her dropping from above, showed the triangle choke, showed the 2 perfect shots, showed the entire 3-second engagement from start to finish. It showed Chief Rourke and his men pinned down, unable to act, unable to contribute. It showed that she had ended the threat alone. The final piece of data was audio from the mess hall. The recording was crystal clear, perfect fidelity. The lieutenant's voice, loud, arrogant, theatrical. "This is the officer's table. Your place is over there. Learn it." The sound of the tray hitting the floor, the clatter of metal on concrete, the spray of liquid. Then his final pathetic boast after she had walked away. "Guess she learned her lesson." The presentation ended. The main screen went black. Kira said nothing. She had not offered a single word of commentary, had not editorialized, had not added emotion or interpretation. She had simply presented the data. Cold, hard, irrefutable. The kind of evidence that could not be argued with, could not be spun, could not be reframed. Lieutenant Garrett Vance was pale. His face was slick with sweat despite the air conditioning. His carefully constructed fiction had been systematically and mercilessly dismantled by pure, unassailable fact. Every lie exposed, every fabrication revealed, every claim proven false. He looked like a man watching his entire life collapse in real time. Admiral Webb stared at the blank screen for a full minute. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Then he turned his piercing gaze on the lieutenant. When he spoke, his voice was still quiet, still soft, but now it carried something else. A cold fury that was more terrifying than any shout could ever be. "You are a liar," he said. The words fell like stones into a deep well. Heavy. Final. "Sir, the lieutenant began. His voice was strangled, desperate. "You are a liar," Admiral Webb repeated, cutting him off. "You are a coward, and you are a disgrace to the uniform you wear." He did not raise his voice, did not have to. His quiet fury was more terrifying than any display of rage. In a moment of crisis, your ego was a greater threat to this base than the enemy. Your arrogance blinded you. Your incompetence nearly cost us everything. He gestured to Kira, his hand moving slowly, deliberately. "This contractor you dismissed, this woman you shoved in a mess hall, this person you ordered to the perimeter like she was some clerk who had wandered into the wrong room. She is an asset of Tier 1 national importance. Her presence here is classified above your security clearance. It is classified above the colonel's security clearance." He paused. Let the weight of that sink in. Let every man in the room understand what that meant. There were levels of classification that most people never even knew existed. Programs so black that their very existence was denied. Operators so valuable that their names were erased from all records. Kira was one of those. A ghost in the machine. A weapon kept in reserve for when everything else had failed. "You did not command her," Admiral Webb continued. His eyes never left the lieutenant's face. "You did not direct her. You got in her way. And she saved you and this entire base in spite of your pathetic posturing." The admiral stood up. His movements were slow, deliberate. He looked at Chief Rourke. "Master Chief," he said. "Sir," the chief responded. His voice was steady, professional. "Escort this man to the brig. He is to be held on charges of dereliction of duty, cowardice in the face of the enemy, and falsifying an official report. His career is over." The lieutenant looked as if he had been physically struck. His face went from pale to gray. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Sir," he finally whispered. The word was barely audible. A plea, a prayer. "Get him out of my sight," Admiral Webb commanded. His voice was final, absolute, the kind of order that could not be appealed, could not be argued with. Chief Rourke walked over to the lieutenant. His face was unreadable, professional. He placed a hand on the young officer's arm. Not rough, not gentle, just firm. The lieutenant did not resist, did not fight, did not argue. He was broken, shattered. His carefully constructed self-image demolished. his future erased. His career ended not with a bang, but with a quiet command in a cold room. As the chief led him from the room, Admiral Webb turned to face Kira. He looked at her for a long moment, studying her. Then he looked at the colonel, at the other staff officers in the room, at the witnesses to what had just transpired. Then he did something no one had ever seen him do. He squared his shoulders, brought his heels together, and rendered a slow, perfect salute. It was not a salute to a subordinate, not the casual acknowledgement of rank that officers exchanged 100 times a day. This was something else. This was a salute of profound and absolute respect. A salute from the institution itself to the pure, undeniable power of competence. A recognition that in the hierarchy of things that mattered, skill and ability trumped rank and position every single time. Kira did not salute back. She was not technically in his chain of command. She was a contractor, a ghost, someone who existed outside the normal structure. But she gave a short, almost imperceptible nod, a nod of acknowledgement, a recognition that the message had been received and understood. The correction was complete. The system had purged its flaw. The balance had been restored. In the days that followed, a new quiet settled over the base. It was different from the quiet before. The old quiet had been a backdrop of ignorance. Men going about their duties without understanding the larger picture, without knowing that they were living on the edge of a knife. The new quiet was something else. It was a cloak of reverence, of understanding, of respect. The story of what had happened spread not in loud retellings, but in hushed whispers, in exchanged glances, in the way men moved when they saw her walking the perimeter. The legend of the quiet woman in the mess hall became part of the base's DNA, woven into its culture. A story that would be told to new arrivals, a lesson that would be taught without words. She was seen occasionally, walking the perimeter at dawn, sitting alone in the shade of a container during the hottest part of the day, her tablet in her lap. No one approached her, no one disturbed her. Her solitude was now understood not as aloofness, but as focus, as the natural state of someone operating at a level most people could not comprehend. The culture of the base began to shift. The loud, boisterous displays of bravado that had been common before faded. Men stopped trying to prove themselves through volume and bluster. The measure of a soldier became not how loudly he could shout, but how carefully he could listen, how precisely he could execute, how effectively he could contribute to the mission without needing recognition or praise. Competence, not rank, became the new currency, the thing that mattered, the thing that earned respect. One evening, Kira was on the roof of the Tactical Operations Center, a place she had found early in her deployment, a place where she could see the horizon, where she could watch the sunset paint the dust-filled sky in shades of orange and purple and red. The air was cooler up here. The wind was stronger. It carried the smell of the desert, of sand and stone and ancient things. Chief Rourke came up the access ladder. His movements were slower than they had been 20 years ago. His knees protested. His back ached. But he still moved with purpose, with dignity. He walked over to where she stood, left a respectful distance between them. They stood in silence for several minutes, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, watching the light fade. "The Admiral has instituted a new training module," Chief Rourke said finally. His voice was a low rumble, the voice of a man who had smoked too many cigarettes and breathed too much dust. "Mandatory for all junior officers. It's called the Nemesis Protocol." Kira did not look at him, kept her eyes on the horizon. "It's a simulation," he continued. "Based on the data from your tablet, it puts them in a no-win scenario, a total systems failure, command and control down, enemy inside the wire, everything going wrong at once. It's designed to teach them one thing." "What's that?" she asked. Her voice was barely disturbing the air, barely louder than the wind. "Humility," Chief Rourke said. He turned to look at her profile, at the woman who had changed everything. It teaches them that there are threats their training cannot comprehend. It teaches them that the loudest voice in the room is usually the wrong one. It teaches them to identify and listen to the quiet professional, the person who doesn't need to prove anything because their competence speaks for itself. She remained silent. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, on the place where the sun was touching the earth. "The story of what happened here," the chief said, "it will be taught at the academies for the next 50 years. The lieutenant's failure, your success. It's already become a case study, a lesson about the tactical liability of prejudice, a lesson about how true strength is discipline, not aggression, a lesson about how the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you underestimate, a lesson forged in a mess hall and paid for in the cold, hard currency of competence." Kira gave another one of her small, almost imperceptible nods. Her work here was done. The system had been purged of its flaw. The balance had been restored. In a few days, she would move on to the next assignment, the next problem that needed solving, the next place where her unique skills were required. She would disappear back into the shadows, back into the world of classified operations and redacted files, back into the place where ghosts lived. "Your father would be proud," Chief Rourke said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. For the first time, a flicker of something shifted in her flat gray eyes. It was not sadness, not joy. It was a moment of quiet, settled peace. The kind of peace that comes when a long journey reaches its end, when a vow made in grief and rage is finally fulfilled, when the ghost of the past can be laid to rest. The vow she had made in the silence of that snow-swept mountain range 13 years ago had been honored. She had become what her father had always known she could be. Not just a soldier, not just an operator, but a correction to the system itself. A force that pushed back against incompetence and arrogance and the kind of ego that got good people killed. The sun dipped below the horizon. The sky darkened from orange to purple to deep blue. The generators hummed their steady, reassuring rhythm in the cool desert night. The base was safe. The threat had been neutralized. The enemy's command node had been reduced to rubble 8,000 miles away. The network had collapsed. The signal she had been tracking for months was gone. Silent. Dead. And Kira Brandt, the hidden master, the ghost in the machine, watched over it all. A silent guardian in a world that was only just beginning to learn her language. A world that was slowly, painfully, learning that the hardest fight was not against external enemies. The hardest fight was mastering oneself. Mastering ego. Mastering the need to be seen and heard and acknowledged. And in that fight, she was undefeated. Her presence had changed them. Not by force, not by lecture, not by demanding respect or recognition, but by example. By simply being so overwhelmingly competent that denial became impossible. By proving that the most powerful weapon in any arsenal was not a gun or a bomb or a drone. It was a mind that refused to be provoked and a skill set that could not be denied. The quiet professional had proven a truth that the world kept forgetting and kept having to relearn. That true strength whispered, that real power did not need to announce itself, that the person you dismissed, the person you overlooked, the person you shoved in a mess hall might be the very person who held your life in their hands. The world was full of loud, arrogant men. Men like Lieutenant Garrett Vance. Men who mistook volume for authority. Who confused position with competence. Who believed that the trappings of power were the same as actual capability. The world would always produce such men. It was a constant, an inevitability. But the world also produced people like Kira Brandt. And when the two met, when ego collided with competence, there was only ever one outcome. The universe corrected itself. The system purged its flaws. And the quiet professional walked away, unnoticed and undefeated, into the next shadow, the next mission, the next problem that needed solving. Chief Rourke stood beside her for a few more minutes. Then he nodded once, a gesture of respect between warriors, between people who understood what it cost to operate at that level, what it demanded, what it took from you. He turned and walked back to the access ladder, climbed down, left her alone on the roof. Kira remained, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, the same stars her father had seen on that mountain ridge 13 years ago, the same stars that had watched over countless battlefields and countless warriors throughout human history, silent witnesses to the eternal struggle between competence and incompetence, between discipline and chaos, between those who did the work and those who took the credit. She took a slow, deep breath, let it out. Her heart rate was 50 beats per minute. Her mind was clear, calm, focused. Tomorrow she would begin preparing for the next phase, the next mission. But tonight, just for a moment, she allowed herself this quiet satisfaction, this settling of accounts, this honoring of a promise made to a man who had taught her that competence was the only currency that mattered. And somewhere in whatever place warriors go when they fall, Colonel Marcus Brandt watched his daughter and knew that his legacy was secure, that the lessons he had taught had taken root, that the instrument he had forged had become exactly what it needed to be. The correction was complete, the balance was restored, and the quiet professional stood watch in the darkness, a silent guardian that the world would never fully know or understand, but whose presence made all the difference, whose skills kept the world turning, whose discipline held back the chaos. Unnoticed, undefeated, uncompromising, the way it had always been, the way it would always be. As long as there were problems that needed solving, as long as there were threats that lurked in the shadows, as long as there were loud, arrogant men who needed to be reminded of what real competence looked like, she would be there, in the quiet, in the shadows, waiting, watching, ready, always ready.